right? And it's so funny listening to all you. That you guys have covered it all. You're working on it. Let me tell you a little bit about myself and how I got here. So my company is Just Imagine. I have been in association management for about 30 years. My partner and I started when nobody worked at home. You know, I was way back then one of the few stay-at-home moms because most of the women had gone back to work. So I was trying to find a way to stay home with my kids, make money because I had to work, and so home-based association management was kind of formed. So I've been doing that, but lately I'm trying to move my business as well into more private consulting and working with leaders on mindful leadership. So I've been trained in compassionate conversations, contemplative dialogue, dynamic dialogue. So I'm a dialogue facilitator, which has come in really handy. I'm going to talk a little bit about balance. I've been married for 58 years to the same man. I got married at 18. When I married him, he was from Greece, so he had that whole cultural thing, right? And he was very liberal. He was a hippie. I came from Amador County, and I was raised very conservatively. So we made it through that. Then somewhere along the way, we went like this. He's very conservative. I am not. You know, I'm kind of a peace hippie, and he is not. So being a dialogue facilitator has been really helpful because I don't think we would have hit 58 years. Well, actually, it was 59 next month. We would not have hit, not 59, I'm 59, 39. No, I'm 80 years old. All right, she got the 39 feels like 59. But through dialogue, I've been able to do that. And the topic we're going to talk about today, which is self-compassion. Like Jen was saying, put your oxygen mask on first. So my story actually began to why I'm standing here talking about self-compassion was through one of my passions, which is end of life. You know, when I tell people, oh, I love talking about death, they're like, okay, we're not inviting you to the next party, right? This isn't what we want to talk about. But compassion and end of life came about when my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And they lived down in Mexico. They lived in Montana, too cold, so they went to Mexico. And then we moved them up here. So I had them in this state for the first time in 30 years, the same state as me, and I was the only adult caregiving child. So I learned a whole bunch about myself through this experience with my dad and taking care of him until he passed away. So I had two parents that had moved up. I had grandchildren. I have adult boys. One was going through a divorce. I'm married and I have a business. I think some of you guys can probably relate, right? There's like 100 balls going on in the air, and I was running around thinking I was doing a really good job, for the most part. And where things kind of came to a head for me and a change happened was I'd been caring for my dad like 24/7 before he passed away, and taking care of my mom, and still getting home and working, and doing all these things, right? And I remember, if you've been with anybody at the end of life, sometimes it's kind of messy. And I have an extremely weak stomach. So that point in time came where weak stomachs can act up, right? So I'm helping, my mom's crippled, by the way. She's in her walker. We're taking care of my dad and trying to change him, and I start dry heaving. I'm like, and so I run out of the room, and I run into the bathroom, and the only thing I said to myself in the mirror is, you suck. You are the worst daughter ever. Oh my gosh, you can't sit there and take care of your dad. You're letting your, and I had all these words to myself. And I thought, oh my God, what am I doing? And that's when I kind of woke up and I thought, if you did that, would I say that to you? You're a terrible daughter. Oh my God, I wouldn't, right? But I do it to myself. And so that was kind of my epiphany that started me on this journey of learning more and more about compassion, but self-compassion. And so, just as a quick note, before I get into it a little bit, had to practice this self-compassion about being here today. So Stephanie talked to me about this, I think, over the summer, the end of summer, right? And so, like a good girl, I thought I put it in my calendar, all's good, right? And I have a meeting I'm supposed to be at in San Francisco, and I'm also supposed to be speaking in front of the City Council of Elk Grove tonight, because they're passing a charter for declaring the city of compassion. So it all came out like, oh no, what am I going to do? I have a client in San Francisco. I'm supposed to be in Vacaville. I'm supposed to be back up there. And I really kind of beat myself up about it. But taking a breath and talking about self-compassion, which is kindness to myself, realizing, number one, it can't be in 3 places at one time, right? So it gave me an opportunity to reach out to people and get compassion from them. My client in San Francisco is all cool. We'll take care of it, you know. So these things happen all the time, but my first go-to when that happened was, and I won't use the language I use at home, but I'm muffed up. You know, I'm not paying attention to business. I didn't have it on my calendar. How could I do that, right? So it's that self-talk. So this started me on looking at ways that we can do better at this. And one of the people I found, everybody read her book. Has anybody heard of Kristen Neff?
I'm sorry, who?
Kristen Neff. She created Mindful Self-Compassion. She's got a fantastic program. Her entire thing is about self-compassion. And because everybody talks about, in my world, everybody talks about compassion. Nobody addresses self-compassion. It's like, okay, I can help you and I can work on this. And believe me, the way I met Stephanie is I used to manage a charitable nonprofit that worked with her. And I was going around helping all these different nonprofits because that's what ours did. But never myself, right? So as I was being compassionate, well, the same with my folks. During all of this, being so compassionate to my kids and my family, I developed type 2 diabetes, I gained a ton of weight, I got sick. I'll tell you in the end because it has a happy ending. But, so anyways, I started researching on this, and Kristen has 3 main components that she talks to in practicing and learning how to be self-compassionate with ourselves. So the first one is mindfulness. Does anybody in here have a mindfulness practice? What it might mean? Okay, that's good. That gives me something to talk about here. So mindfulness for me is checking in with myself and my beliefs. It's not necessarily sitting quietly and meditating. I try. It doesn't always work well. But mindfulness is really just paying attention to what's going on in the mind and checking things out. So that girl or that woman that was standing in the mirror saying she was a bad daughter, did I ever ask myself, what did I think a good daughter was? Because when Stephanie was talking about perfection, that was running through my head, right? So a good daughter is perfect. A good daughter is this, or a good wife is this. Mindfulness is where we just slow down and give ourselves a pause and say, what does that mean? Where did that come from? Why do I believe the way that I believe? Because we have stuff living in us that we don't even know where it comes from. We're just acting automatically out of it. So a mindfulness practice really helps us get in touch with what's going on inside and why we might be feeling the way that we feel. So one of the things I wanted to ask you to do, if you would be willing to do a couple exercises today, just real briefly. So what I'd like you to do is close your eyes and experience a little mindfulness. Take a deep, clearing breath, which, by the way, is always a really good way to reset yourself when you're jumping. So then I want you to actually check in with yourself. How is your body feeling right now? Do you have thoughts running through your head? Are you already working on what you need to do when you leave here after 1? And what do you need right now? Do you know what you need right now? So that's just a little quick, you can open your eyes, a little quick example of something you can do for yourself is when you're in the midst of something, take a deep breath, stop, and say, how am I feeling? What's going on? What do I need? I never, through all these years, did I ever stop to think and ask myself, what do you need, Brenda? I knew what my son Josh needed or my husband might need or work needed. But what do I need right now? And I think when Jen was saying that about taking a step back and saying it's okay, I can't do this right now. That is one of the most compassionate and self-compassionate acts you can do. I can't engage with you right now. I have to do that with my husband all the time. I don't want to hear about politics. I can't talk about that right now. I love you, but I'm not going to talk to you because it doesn't do me any good. It kind of ill, to be honest. So did anything come up for you? Did you feel anything? Or there's no big epiphany with it, but I thought if somebody would like to share. And you don't have to.
I'll share. When you said, what do you need right now? Food, because I'm juice cleansing for 3 days.
Oh.
So that was the first thing that came to my mind.
Being aware of that, right?
I was aware of it in that moment.
Yeah, I'll share. I was just feeling a little anxious and stuff from the post holidays, but also caregiving for not just one parent but two. So everything you're saying is resonating with me. But also how to have a little compassion that I can't do it all and I can't be there every single day. So I did reach out to my brother for some help and some other family members. So some pieces taken care of both. I was taking care of my dad's wife who has Parkinson's, but now he's been ill for 2 months. So he can't take care of himself or her. So now I've got double whammy going on. So I'm just really like trying not to be the perfectionist thing we're just talking about too. Not being, I can't go over there every single day and make a fresh meal every single day. It's not gonna, I've been doing that for 2 weeks and it's catching up to me. So anyway.
Yeah, that's
self-compassion.
right. And reaching out for some help. I had to do the same thing because when my dad was going through that, my dad was 6'6", tall, skinny guy. He's got Alzheimer's. My mom had issues. She's the one I ended up always having to run to the ER because as the caregiver, she wasn't taking care of herself. So I would rush them to the ER. I'd get mom in a wheelchair that you can't push, right? Tell dad, stay right there, and either go park or go in to get him checked in. And then when we were done, have to repeat it. Dad, stay there, don't, right? And I never asked for help because I was a good daughter, you know. And then my kids said, why aren't you asking us to help? And my husband said, I would do that. So I had to get beyond that perfection, right? So anyways, you can take it doesn't take a lot to have a mindfulness practice. I don't care what the books say, I don't care what the programs say. I know for myself, if I just do 5 minutes in the morning or at the end of the day, even doing a review at the end of the day, how did it go? Where did I miss the mark? There's no, so my spiritual director told me, sin is not a sin, it's just missing the mark. It's an archery term. So where did I miss the mark and can I recalibrate? And just being aware of it. So that's being mindful of what's going on in us. The second thing that Kristen brings up is, let me put the paper straight here, because I forgot I was speaking till last week, self-kindness, and that's what we were talking about, right? So anybody familiar with the golden rule? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Isn't it funny that it's not do unto others as you would do unto yourself? How do we think that might work? You know, if I talk to people the way, again, some of the self-talk that's going on, number one, you guys would never invite me back, and nobody want to hang with me, right? It wouldn't work out that well. So how much comfort do we give ourselves? Again, thinking of that good daughter crying in the mirror, did I comfort myself at all, or did I kick somebody who was crying down instead of saying, honey, my gosh, what you're trying to handle and do, you're doing the best you can. So like a good girl, just let you know, I put Vicks up my nose, I wrapped my face, I went back in there, and I finished helping my mom. But I did it from a place where I was being a little bit better with myself and not beating myself up. In addition, is anybody familiar with the work of Dr. Emoto? He does energy on water, okay? So there's scientific stuff, and some say this stuff is bogus, so you can take it or not take it, but there are some scientific studies about the power of our words. So behavioral kinesiology, never say that right. I've actually been in a room where they've tested this with there were 500 men at this remodeling contractor, and they brought in this behavioral kinesiologist to show how, if I were to approach you, let's say, and I had an attitude or a face, how your energy drops, your muscle tone drops, right? So there's stuff circling around this that our words have energy. What kind of energy are we sending into ourselves if we're not speaking in a kind and loving way? And saying it's okay not to be perfect. In fact, I'll get to that in the next one. I don't think we're meant to be perfect. I don't think this is supposed to be a perfect life. That's the beauty sometimes of it, is the messiness of it. So, and the other one I want to tell you, has anybody called themselves a fraud? inside internally, I wouldn't tell anybody. I would say, oh, you're so confident, you go out and talk, and inside I'm like, oh, I know this bullshit. I'm faking it all, I don't know what I'm doing, oh my God. And, you know, I feel like such a fraud, I'm not what they think I am. Well, how kind is that, right? Instead of maybe getting in a conversation with somebody and saying, so how did you see that? You know, how did that go across with you, right? But finding out information, instead of believing the little critic inside that it's the ego, just really don't kill your ego. We need the ego to survive, but we need to control the ego, right? Not let it control us. So being able to do that is create a mantra for yourself if you don't have one, or an intention that you repeat to yourself, okay? So again, let's take a deep breath and close our eyes for a minute. We'll practice something real quick. So think of a time in your life when you've been hard on yourself. I'm sure you can find one. If not, I can give you some. Now, thinking about that situation, think about something kind you would say to yourself. Some examples could be, I'm loved, I am safe, I am human. So this is something, you can open your eyes. It's a little short taste, but this is something you can do at home as well. Is just, again, it only takes a minute, but to reassure yourself that you're safe, that you're loved, that you're great, that you're awesome. Because we have tapes running in the background that we're not even aware of, carried through from when we were young, things we've been told, right? So somewhere in my deep psyche, there's this whole thing about what it means to be a good daughter. It means you don't disappoint anybody, you always do the right thing, you're always responsible. But taking that time to look at it, and then tell myself, oh, you are good, I am loved. So that's a good exercise that will help build, because we're not taught self-compassion in school, or many times by our parents. We're taught self-esteem is talked about, which self-esteem actually on a more basic level is about the ego, and it's about creating specialness and how I'm different. Where self-compassion is just that deep kindness to yourself. So the kindness we practice for others will help us, and they're showing scientifically as well in the medical community that this all does well for your health, that self-kindness. So I'll just tell you real quick, after all this meltdown, type 2 diabetes, getting sick, when I immersed myself into the compassion work more, and I asked myself, what do you need? What I came up with is I need to be healthy for my grandkids. You know, I need to, there's mountains I want to climb, and if I'm carrying 100 pounds too much, there's no freaking way I'm going anywhere even outside my door. So I entered a program, I reversed type 2 diabetes, and you probably don't want to eat the way I do, because it's like, it's worse than vegan. It's whole food, plant-based, no oil or sugar. So it's very limiting, but I reversed type 2 diabetes, lost 50, have 40 more to go, or just about 60 and 40 more to go. But it's only, the only reason I did it is I stopped my whole world and said, what is it I need? What is it I need? And I want to be healthy because I do want to sit beside dying and work in that field, and I can't do it if I'm like, oh, you know, I'm dying here myself, I'm not feeling good. So finding what it is that you need is really important. And the last point that Kristen brings up is common humanity. And I think we forget this, that we're all human. We all have shared exactly some of the same things in different circumstances. I bet everybody in here has experienced pain, or loss, or suffering, or sadness, or joy, or excitement. Our circumstances leading it to that might be different, but we have that in common. When I think about doing something and failing, I think I'm like the only freaking person in the whole world that's gonna fail. You know, if Susie was doing it, she would do great. I bombed. And when I do bomb, what it was for me in the past is I wouldn't do it again. I only did, somebody in here said something about safety or stretching. It really struck me because I never stretched my boundaries, because if I didn't, then I did really good right here, right? So I couldn't fail. But it doesn't take any courage to stay right there. So when I started really studying common humanity and our interdependence, it's like you fell before. You fell before, right? I mean, some might be big, some might be little, but we've all experienced that. So we have this common shared thing. So the next time I start feeling really bad, and I look out in an audience or with the group I'm working with, they've experienced the same thing. And then just I'm honest with it. It's like, my game's not on today, or I'm not feeling it, whatever, but I'm honest with what's going on, because the people I'm hanging with, like all of you, we're all human. We're sharing this common humanity. So we don't feel like we're alone in it. And so those three are her deepest, her three main circumstances. I want to make sure I'm hitting them all. So anyways, the practice here really is just to remind yourself you're not alone. So, and especially in a group like this is so fantastic. I love these types of communities that are built, especially with women, while we heal and strengthen to take our gifts out in the world. But you have a great place where you can go to somebody and say, hey, this is what I'm feeling. Can you tell me what you see? So sharing that. So I want to make sure those are really good for you guys. So I just want to say self-compassion is a practice. It's not a perfection. We have years of stuff in us that we're trying to get over. But if we could go into schools and teach children, or even our own families, to be self-compassionate when they mess up, instead of you missed that goal, or getting shame. I was raised with shame. I have great parents. They didn't know any better. Shame on you. My shame buttons are really huge. But if we could teach children and ourselves just to be kind, and be kind to ourselves first. So it's that whole oxygen mask thing. They do that on the airplane for a reason. You cannot help others or do your passions. Everybody was talking about what you're passionate about. If you don't take care of yourself first, there's no time for it. And I always think about a cup. An empty cup can't pour anything out for others. So if we fill ourselves up, we're filling our cup. And I like to fill it to overflowing, because then I'm still taking care of myself, and I can do all those things that I'm passionate about. So the last thing I wanted to just end with, to let you know how I stepped into my dream, when I talked end of life, volunteering for hospice doesn't take any special education or classes, because I've taken them all. But one of my shame buttons is I never got a degree from college. I've gone on and off through the years, but you get married at 19, you have your first at 21, not a lot going on there until you're a little bit older, right? So there's things I haven't allowed myself to stretch out to do, because I thought I didn't have that ticket to get in the door. So being kind to myself, recognizing my common humanity with everyone, I got offered a, out of the blue, once I opened up to it, never came before, but once I opened up to it, I'm now the executive director for the Sacramento Hospice Consortium. So my whole world is about hospice and end-of-life issues and working with nonprofit hospices. So the only way I was able to do that was in stepping back, being mindful for what I needed to do and what I wanted, and to risk it, step out and be vulnerable. So that's kind of, I do a whole workshop on this. So that's a little capsule of how you can have some compassion. And I wanted to show you this, because this was a compassionate act. I took this in to get it done a couple years ago. I was giving a speech. So it wasn't lined up perfectly. And I thought, okay, you're gonna talk about perfection. And I thought, oh, I'm gonna go back down there and get mad. But when I think about it now, this is just like my so whenever I do a speech, I usually start that with, this is my sign, because I wasn't going to buy a new one, and I didn't want to waste the product and have them have to do a new one. So it's like I'm too lazy what I want to. But I just want to let you know, with my company, just imagine I'm about conversation, compassion, and connection, which is kind of all the stuff I just went over really briefly. So I have some business cards here. I do a program called Peaceful Promises, Compassionate Conversations. So if anything ever comes up for you down here, I'd love to come down. I work in the Bay Area too. So that's like when I leave here, that's where I'm going. So I pass this way. This is the first time I've ever stopped, so this is really cool. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.